Ah, China. The land of ancient architecture, diverse culture, and... Wait, what is that? What the fuck? Hi, hello and welcome. My name is Ben Hazred, and on this episode of History's Wackiest Weirdos, we're taking a look at the brother of Christ, Xiuquan. I would just like to preface this video by apologising in advance for any names or places that I may mispronounce. I will try my best, but I likely will have made some mistakes because I don't speak Chinese. Now on to the video. China in the 1800s. The empire is Qing. It wasn't having a great time at this point, mostly because of a certain series of wars. Over, yes, you know it, you love it, drugs. More specifically, opium. Due to the Qing government not wanting all of their people hooked on drugs, they were forced to ban it, leading to the British and French governments declaring open war in order to keep their sweet, exploited, drug-filled Chinese cash cow. Underdeveloped militarily, compared to the colonial Western powers, China lost, and was forced to sign the unequal treaties, which granted trading privileges, extraterritoriality, and treaty ports to Britain and France, which left China in a pretty poor spot. Although, in order to find our main man Hong, we need to travel a little back in time. The year is 1814, and a bouncing holy baby boy is born to parents Hong Xingyang and Madame Wang. He likely grew up quite well off, as his father had some power in the local area. But growing up, Hong wasn't all that interested in religion. In fact, he was only interested in one thing: scholarship. So much so was Hong a little nerd, that his family sacrificed their wealth in order to provide Hong a formal education, in the hopes that he would succeed in the civil service examinations. However, this was not meant to be. For those of you who don't know, the imperial examinations, or the civil service examinations, were tests used throughout Chinese history, where if one passed said test, then they could get a job in government regardless of their background. Unfortunately for Hong, the rich were able to take advantage of this system by paying for the top quality of education as well as diplomas for their children. This helped to ensure that the majority of those that passed the tests were not the general population. Unsurprisingly, Hong failed his first attempt, which meant that he had to return home to work as a farmer. In 1836, our plucky young 22-year-old Hong returns, having trained and studied like no other. Failing, again. No worries though, because our boy does not give up. Look at him. Look at his cheeks. Does he really look like the sort of man who would take these losses, form an entirely new religious sect of Christianity which leads to the death of millions? Don't answer that. Anyway, after revising some more, Hong comes back and takes the test for a third time. What a legend. Well, he fails again, and this time he doesn't take the loss too well. He has a severe mental breakdown, and has visions of visiting heaven where he possessed a celestial family that was apart from his earthly one. This included a heavenly father, mother, elder brother, sister-in-law, wife and son. The heavenly father, God, for those of you who haven't figured it out yet, wore a black dragon robe and a high-brimmed hat with a long golden beard. He was told to slay the demons infesting heaven, and he did so with his heavenly brother. Hong later also claimed that he saw Confucius being punished by God for leading the people astray. After recovering from the breakdown, Hong became a teacher for the next few years, before taking the imperial exam one final time. Upon failing once again, Hong began to carefully read through some Christian pamphlets, and he came to the realization that he was the son of God and the brother of Christ. Upon this obvious realization, and I kid you not, Hong and his cousin commissioned two giant 3.3 foot tall swords that they called the demon slaying swords. That is insane. It's insane. After preaching in Guangxi for 5 months with little luck, Hong returned home, and obviously he became a teacher again. I can only imagine that he would tell his students that if they didn't do their homework, then he'd just smite them. In 1847, after travelling and having his ideas begin to gain some traction, Hong started his translation and adaptation of the Bible, which he called the Taiping Bible. He presented to his followers that this new Bible was actually evidence of an ancient version of the religion in China. By 1850, Hong had amassed between 10,000 and 30,000 followers, which led the Qing government, which was already weakened by the Opium Wars, to become seriously worried at the intents of Hong's movement. In order to nip this growing problem in the bud, the Qing government sent some soldiers to combat Hong's force, but lost badly, which prompted the government to announce a full-scale attack in 1851. Upon sending the Imperial Army, they lost, again, and the Manchu commander of said army was beheaded. Upon this, Hong pronounced the founding of the Heavenly Kingdom of Transcendent Peace on 11th of January 1851, before taking the towns of Yong'an and Nanjing, proclaiming Nanjing to be their capital. Ironic that the Kingdom of Peace used a lot of violence to gain their power. But after this, Hong attempted a reform and modernisation program. He created a civil bureaucracy, reformed the calendar, introduced land reforms which made women more equal to men, with some communal land ownership even being introduced. However, whilst Hong and his religion were relatively progressive for their time in trying to increase equality between men and women, they then went back on this by enforcing monogamy and separating men from women, despite Hong and the other leaders maintaining large amounts of concubines. You were doing so well. Also, as a side note, Britain and France originally had really friendly relations with the rebels, as they would support any side that would let them pump the Chinese people full of drugs. But Hong then banned opium, which left the colonial powers to take the side of the Qing government. Also, Hong is credited by many for having created an early form of communism in China, which supposedly helped to greatly inspire Mao Zedong's creation of the Chinese Communist state. Not all was rosy for Hong though, as a fellow leader named Xiuquan became known as the Eastern King and amassed vast swaths of power, claiming to speak with the voice of God. Hong became very suspicious and believed that Yang was aiming to take his place. Hong then murdered Yang and his entire family in a purge which spun massively out of control. Where have we seen this before? Following a failed attempt to take Shanghai, Qing forces slowly began to gain ground on the rebels. By the spring of 1864, the stronghold of Tianjin was besieged, with Hong and the rebels inside. With food supplies running low, Hong had an ingenious idea: to order all of his subjects to eat manna, the food that God created and gave to the Israelites during the events of the Bible. Despite not actually having this food, Hong began to gather weeds from around his garden, before eating them. Possibly from just these random weeds that he had found on the floor, he became extremely ill and died. On the 1st of June 1864, he was promptly buried in a yellow silk shroud without a coffin. Then, on the 30th of July 1864, Qing forces dug him up, beheaded him, burned his body, and then fired the ashes out of a cannon in order to ensure that his remains had no resting place as an eternal punishment for the uprising. That's a little overkill, but whatever. After Hong's death, his son took over. 14 years old, he was young, holy, powerful, and he led his forces to an overwhelming victory in the face of the Qing Empire. Just kidding, he almost immediately lost the city and then was captured, before being executed just a few months later in November of 1864. Upon that, the Heavenly Kingdom was abolished, and Hong Xiuquan's story comes to an end. The Taiping Rebellion was a truly horrific time in Chinese history, and the conflict from 1850 to 1864 left around 20 to 30 million people dead. Most of this number were civilians. Within context, the American Civil War was happening at the same time, and resulted in around 600,000 deaths. The Taiping Rebellion was undoubtedly the single bloodiest civil war in human history. And it all started with one person. The man, the myth, the brother of Christ, Hong Xiuquan. If there is one lesson to be taken from this video, then it's to be wary of your teachers. You never know when they may claim to be the sibling of Christ. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing, it would really help me out. If any of you have any ideas for future videos, please let me know in the comment section down below. Anyways, that's enough from me. Until I see you next, bye bye.